So, welcome to another very exciting episode. It certainly is for me. I hope you enjoy it as much as I've enjoyed all of these so far. I'm delighted to have the father of a special needs child, which we will delve into. That really caught my attention. As it turns out, John has got a number of moments, chapters in his backstory that mirror mine, which I wasn't aware of, but I was particularly interested in his language, his profile, and how he has processed and also how he has identified a lot of the challenges that come about as a special needs parent.
Hi, thank you very much, Thomas. My name's John Goralski, and I'm a parent of an autistic boy, or actually he's a young man now, 23. And that it was probably the hardest and most rewarding thing I've ever gone through. It really changed me, and everybody says that when they have a child, but child with special needs, it takes on its own world, and there's a lot of stresses, and one day leads into the other. And for me, there was one day in particular where I start my book with, where my child had he had a meltdown that lasted a whole day. And
Wow.
I mean, it was bad. It started at the sidelines of a baseball game and kind of erupted throughout the day at our house. And there came a point where I just shut the door, went downstairs, and like abandoned him basically in the middle of his meltdown. And I was kind of hoping the police would come knocking on the door and maybe take him from me. And I realized that, I mean, up until that point, I knew he was in crisis, but I think I realized at that moment that I was in crisis too, and so I started working on myself. And for, 18 years, 20 years, I've been working on myself and working on trying to be the best parent I could be, trying to be that honest, unselfish, loving, straightforward person that my parents were, and I've learned a lot about myself along the way. Now, what happened was when COVID hit and everybody was stuck in their houses, I was working at a small paper that closed, and I was hearing news reports about people being in stress and families being in stress, and I noticed that we weren't in stress, and I felt that, at this point I needed to put my experience out there to help parents that might be stressed. It's out of responsibility because, excuse me, there's really not a lot of resources for, like, if a parent is struggling. There's resources out there for how to help your child or how to help, but nothing. I could never find anything about if I was struggling as a parent, and so I wanted to put that out there because the isolation of being a parent, feeling like nobody understands you, that your life is, I mean, you're isolated, you're insecure, nothing's working out. And how do you find peace in that situation? And that's what my book was about. It took me 3 years to write it. It came out, it's called Parent in Crisis: Finding Peace and Purpose in a Special Needs Home. And it's a story about how I learned to get through all the crisis and actually become a mentoring father.
So that's actually that book is a journey. It
Yes.
took you 3 years to write, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for bringing it up.
And I want to call you up on something because so the reason why I'm here is very similar. I had a calling that came about around parenting, but specifically as a dad, and I think it's worth highlighting that because let's have this right. The optics that you deliver, your version of parenting a special needs child, that's very much as a dad. You wrote the book as a dad. You didn't write it as a husband and a father. You wrote it as a father co-parenting, but a father of a special needs child. And you were rolling with the punches on that one on your own.
Sure.
Is that fair? So and again, it's contextualized for my benefit and the audience because everything that I'm doing is actually very similarly, it's been triggered by the fact that men are now particularly segregated, if not ostracized, within the parenting domain. So if dads go into family court, I mean, there's a huge charity over here that's very, very effective at supporting fathers that have ended up on their own as parents, whether that's in a healthy dynamic or a toxic one, and it's called Families Need Fathers. And very early on in my separation, I went to them for guidance and advice. I was lost. And they said, whatever you do, find a way to reach resolution, because if you're going to court, you're going to lose. Now, that's in the UK. We're kind of following your lead when it comes to law, and it's money talks and it will get you a result depending on how big your bag of cash is. And I don't mean that in a criminal way. I just mean if you can afford a phenomenal lawyer, you will get phenomenal legal support to get the outcome you're looking for. And that started to happen over here. Is the process for fathers outside of the special needs environment, which again it brings a magnification to the process, is that dads are poorly supported. And I think anything that can help them, this podcast, your book. I mean, I look, John, one of the primary reasons why I wanted you on the show was I still remember when we found out we were finally pregnant, because we tried for 2 or 3 years to conceive. And the only thing that scared me was the health of my baby, because I could not conceive of having the strength that you've built up. And I know, we touched on it, that there was a meltdown day, which I think we really need to dig into, but
Yeah.
that that strength of character, that resolution to be the father that you want to be, that you can look back on and be proud of, that Jack can look back on if he has that presence of mind, which I know he must do, because one of the things about autistic children that I understand is they are tremendously connected with their emotions, and they're tremendously connected with great energy, because you see them drop love on people and you can't fathom out why. And it turns out those people are nice human beings. So that's my snapshot of it. But my point is that I really wanted you on the show for your strength of character and your resolve, and add to that your purpose behind the book. I think
Yeah.
you're faultless.
I don't know that I would say I have a strength of character. I think I've developed it over the time.
Agreed.
It was the hardest thing to hear. Any parent will tell you it's hard when you hear that your child is not going to live a normal life, that your child is not going to maybe find success or love or any of that stuff, and or that they're not going to be able to function like a normal child. And I remember the day when we heard the actual diagnosis of autism, and it was clear that he was struggling. At that point in his life, every day he would have meltdowns and temper tantrums, and he couldn't speak for himself. So, all the stuff that comes with speech, like emotions and stuff, they were just couldn't handle him. And his life was really one of turmoil, and so was mine. So it really was I mean, I loved him. I've always loved him. And I think when you start with that, then you say, okay, what do I need to do this better?
Yeah.
And I had to take a real hard look at myself. When I found that I was in crisis too, I think I shared it with you earlier. I start the book off with a story about how my son was having a meltdown that lasted a whole day. Somewhere in the middle of it, I just disengaged and just like left him in his room and went downstairs, and I realized I was in crisis too, that it wasn't just him. I wasn't just like trying to manage him. I was in crisis too. And I don't believe anybody's good in a crisis. You might
No.
say,
Oh,
yeah, a policeman runs into, a fireman runs into a burning building and he's great in a crisis. Well, that's because he's trained. And for him, that's not a crisis. When he's at home, he struggles just like we do in normal day things.
But he's been trained to
Right.
run into a fire, and he's been trained to deal with different situations. But again, and I one of my pals is a fireman over here, one of the dads.
Oh, nice.
And, with all the best will in the world, they don't know what's coming at them till they're stood there. And part of that's training, and part of it is the fact, well, fuck it, I'm now stood in a burning building, I'm stood in the middle of a fire. But a chemical fire that's full of toxicity fumes and will kill you is different to a very high heat about to become an explosion fire. All of those things are part of that crisis management. But you bring up something that I've really been aware of recently. It's really kept pinging on my radar. And your book, my ethos is we have to grow. Dads have to grow, And part of that is a realization that we're fallible and that, not every day is going to be a day that you want to put in headlines. Not every day is one that you want broadcast on the radio or the TV. However, if you didn't kill yourself, someone else, or do harm, then at the very least you survived the day, learned from it if your awareness and presence is there, if it's up on a decent level of scale, and you come back. And to be fair, I mean, I would have to say your first reaction with no skills, no training, and being thrown in at the deep end of the pool to step away, that's a very smart reaction. It's a smart move because at the end of the day, I bet you were probably 5, 6, 8 hours into that meltdown environment. You'd already tried every bit that was in your tool bag, got nowhere, and thought, hang on, what can I
Yeah.
do?
And that may be true, but when you're a father and you love your kid and you're leaving him at a point where he needs you the most, you could rationalize everything. It wasn't my best day as a dad.
No, listen, at no point am I going to denigrate the reality. I would imagine you left the room because you were in absolute bits. I've had moments like that with my guy. He's absolutely shredded me to the point where, I mean, and I've gone back to him when I've not been at my best, and it's nothing criminal, but I've gone back to him either the following day or later that evening, whenever the opportunity was right. And I've had to sit down and apologize profusely about where I let him and me down so that he could understand what not good looked like, and the fact that I don't have every answer to every question. And I got beaten up this week by someone very close to me that said, "Well, you were a bit of a know-it-all." And I find I I'm laughing about it because it doesn't resonate. It's like the more I'm doing this and the more I'm trying to grow into this modern world, the more I realize how little I know about lots and lots of stuff. I know at my age, I'm 63. At my age, I should know a lot. And with the amount of experience I've had, because we touched on this earlier, experience does create wisdom as long as you've learnt from it, because the experience of crashing a car is great as long as you don't keep crashing cars. Otherwise, the experience carries no wisdom. And I just a quick throwaway analogy. I can't think of a better one. But listen,
Well, this is
and again, look, you've just personified another thing that we do as men, and I've just given you a very soft recognition compliment about the fact that what you did at that moment in time, you're not wild about. But as far as I'm concerned, having gone through a micro fraction of what you have to go through, that's all I could have done.
yeah. And every parent has a bad day, and I
Just the
get
one
that.
or many?
Well, I get that every parent has a bad day. But when I was raising a special needs child that was dealing with the crisis that he was dealing with in the early years, one day would bleed into the next day, would bleed into the next day. And, I didn't have time to resolve the problems from yesterday because I was already being hit by the problems of today. So I think that was my first, when I recognized that I was in crisis too, I could finally start taking care of myself and seeing what was going on in me that was like leading to my temper tantrums or my running away
Short
or,
fuse.
yes. And it's the same thing. Everybody, I think every emotional problem can be traced down to one of three things. It could be insecurity, a failed plan or ambition or expectation, or a um, let's see, a social issue like isolation or self esteem or love or friendship or something. And they can always, every problem can be dealt into those. And I started looking at like my I go back through my day, and I still do this most days. I say, when was I closest to that crisis today? And then I sit there and I say, well, what was going on at the time that I wasn't aware of? What insecurity was I dealing with? What social issue was I dealing with? What plans was I? And I try to figure that out. And I was doing that mostly so that I could stay engaged with my son, when he needed me. And then, you know, the more I learned about myself, the more I learned, oh my gosh, I have a tool for helping him, because
Yeah,
I started noticing that when he was having insecurities, he was having a meltdown. When he was having social issues, he was running into a meltdown.
the
And then
trigger.
I was able to put it into words for him. I was able
Yep.
to sit down and talk through the emotion, talk through the causes, talk through all that stuff, and offer some solutions, which I never was able to do before. And he doesn't always understand everything, but it really has launched us on this path of being in it together, growing up together.
And he's now had 19 plus years. I mean, he's 23 now, and
Yeah.
probably his awareness, etc., is probably a good 18, 19 years worth of, hang on a minute, dad's probably going to help me here, or dad's going to have a process that is going to either resolve or soften. Um, and he's got that comfort and experience of leaning into you that's now been time tested, which I think is pretty awesome.
I hope
I'm
so.
curious. So these methodologies that you've developed, do you track them in a written format, or is it just a self-appraisal process that, because I mean, I meditate, for example, I meditate, but I must have 20 different ways that I drop into, and I might do one style of meditation for 2 or 3 days. And then for whatever reason, something in me says, yeah, we're going to do a bit of sound meditation, or we're going to do a bit of breathing meditation. And I just flip the switch. It's still meditation, but it might be an hour or it might be 5 minutes, and the methodologies are slightly different. The principle's the same, bit of self-reflection, take some time for myself. And then I journal. So I try and keep some written pattern so that I get a feel for progress, and also to look for those triggers. Because I think the other problem is, if we're just self-reflective, we may not always be as critical or as accurate
Right.
as when we write stuff down.
Right. And
Is
in
that
the early
fair?
days, especially, I mean, still when I get confused, I'll write things down. But in the early days specifically, I was writing everything down. I filled up notebooks just trying to figure out, on each day. And, often it wasn't just one thing, it was a bunch of things that overlapped and came to a head,
Yep.
and I had to write down all those things and see how, like, I had multiple insecurities throughout the day that were finally, this was the last straw. The moment of crisis was the last straw. And, I did write it down because you had to see it in paper. And I also talked about it with people, which is really important and that's hard to do sometimes for a parent with special needs because you think that nobody understands you.
John, you touched on this earlier when we were talking, or in your intro, and I have this from two perspectives. One
Yep.
is running businesses, because whenever you're running a business, you're an editor. So as
Mm-hmm.
an editor, you were running the paper.
Sure.
And that meant that, in fact, 100% with an editor, it stops with you, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Everything has to begin or end with you, and you're carrying that weight. And I think that burden, like being a businessman or a senior leader or a C-suite executive, that pressure is something that isolates you, because you can't have that buddy chat, because your responsibility and roles means that you have perspectives and dynamics going on that can't be shared with everyone.
Right.
Then on top of that, your candor so far, and your openness to understand yourself, again, doesn't lend itself to having conversations with people, because I still get pulled up in it now, and I teach this stuff and I'm incredibly aware of it. And still, I don't lean into my powers as much as I should do. So I might go for 4 or 5 days of dark doom and gloom, all on my own. I've
Yeah.
done this to myself. And then suddenly I'll have a bit of a perspiration inspiration, and the light comes back on and I'm okay. And then I'll have a chat with my pal.
Yeah, I can't afford to do that with a child with special needs. When he's in trouble, I need to correct myself. I need to get over myself and talk to people right away. I can't afford to go 3 days like that in order to. So what I've developed is just, when I come up with these, my self inventory or evaluation, I find somebody to talk about it right away. There was a period of time when my son was attacking me every day, physically attacking me every day. And I was fighting off my son 2 or 3 times a day. And when he was attacking me, it was like an animal, attacking me. And I wanted to talk about it with someone. I brought it up with one of my brothers, who was very caring and tried to be understanding, but he just didn't get it.
Yeah.
And, he started heaping out, advice that wasn't really useful. But I was at work, and I was at a football game and I was talking to a policeman, and I don't know how this story came up, but I mentioned it. And he is often in a situation where he feels physically insecure. And we had a really good conversation,
Wow.
and I asked him about how he handles it and stuff. So you can find people to talk to, you know. He didn't maybe understand exactly what it was like to have a son attack him, but he did understand what it was like to be physically insecure in a situation. And he had developed some coping mechanisms that he was able to share with me. And I think that's more important than understanding the specifics of any problem. And when I was isolated or felt isolated, like nobody understood me, I couldn't solve these problems. Once I could identify with people and talk about my problems and stuff like that, I can develop some coping mechanisms. I could develop some, and then I can make better decisions. For me, parenting is always about trying to reach that ideal. And I think we said it before. A parent is honest and straightforward. A perfect parent is honest and straightforward, unselfish and loving. And I found that when I was in those moments of crisis, I was not loving. I was not unselfish. I was the complete opposite of that. And I had no control over it. It just came out of me. But once I became aware of those things that were driving me underneath, I could more work towards being that ideal. And I have a measuring stick for how I acted and how I could do better.
Yeah, John, we all have a measuring stick, and the problem is it's used for measuring and then it's used to beat us up. That's my view on dads. If you And again, coming back to that point you raised, I wholeheartedly follow you on this one, and I've just identified. So I've got two defaults. One is everything, all decision making is love or fear. You can break it down; it will always be love or fear. And I think being a great anything as a human being, you want to be a great dad, a great friend, a great husband. It comes down to love and presence. If you're in a state of love, it's very easy to be present. If you're fully present, it's very easy to drop into a state of love. And that love mindset, because you're present, helps your decision making. I think, and you've picked up on it. I think the days when our coping mechanisms, or the days when we become overwhelmed, distracted, battered ourselves, either through our mind or our emotions, our heart, they're the days that you lose that connectivity to being present or to being loving. And that, look, that, all the time that's coming off of you, that you these are not things that you turned up with. These are things that you've acquired. That presence of mind to go, hang on a minute, have I been fully present? Am I am I properly rested? Have I had enough protein? Have I had enough water? Have I had enough meditation? Have I checked myself in? Have I checked in properly? All those things that you are tracking, you're self aware of, they support you being fully present. Even if it's not all of the time, it's sufficient for you to be hitting the 7 and 8 out of 10 in any given moment during the course of most days,
Sure.
apart from when you're human. Because but that's the truth of it, isn't it? There are going to be days when we are just not going to want to own up to being a parent that day. It was like, let's
Yes.
not talk about that day,
Yes.
please.
But the reason that I called myself a parent in crisis was because those days were more common than the other days.
Yeah.
Raising a special need child is no different than any other child, but it's bigger. They overlap. The problems overlap. It's harder to get out of. And as a result, I was really underwater for a long time. And I see it. I could see it when I see a young parent dealing with those early stages of special needs. I could see it in their faces because it's like looking in a mirror.
Yeah.
And I could see it just being overwhelmed. And I think that's what the book was supposed to be designed to try to help them, get through it and be the best parent that they could be.
I almost want to preface everything I'm going to say around your circumstances and how you parent Jack. It's only my optics. And I thank heavens, I learned a long time ago, we have 2 ears, 2 eyes, and 1 mouth. So whatever you do, use them in proportion. And as much as I talk, I hear and see in a quotient that's proportionate. And only from me looking in, I would say that special needs parenting, in whatever way that may be, whether it's physical or mental, it's relentless.
Yes.
I think that's the most easiest way to umbrella it. and it's
Especially in
not an
those
easy
early
process.
days, especially in those early days when you're trying to figure it out. And it can
Well, you're in
often
crisis then, aren't you? It's like you say, in those early days, you've not got the experience, you've not got the toolkit.
yeah.
There's a book kicking around, I hear, that might help you. What's it
Thank
called again?
It's Parent in Crisis: Finding Peace and Purpose in a Special Needs Home. I don't know if you've seen
We
that.
will make sure that that is within the show notes, and we'll get some links up when
Great,
we put out the social media,
great.
because I think it's important that at the very least people can find it.
Yeah.
And again, it's, just, and I will bang on about this until the end of time. So there are 12 men per day in the UK committing suicide, successfully committing suicide. How many of those are dads? Again, this is another piece of the
Mhm.
jigsaw that is completely wrong. But even the data gathering around the male aspect of mental health of fathers, not just men, but of fathers, is not well documented because the funding isn't there. Because if we were to highlight that of those 12, 6 were fathers, there are no resources instantly available specifically for fathers. There
Yeah.
isn't any education. There isn't any awareness. Or what is there is nominal, and then it's fractional if we compare it to women. And I am in no way, shape, or form a woman hater, female hater, or anything of that nature. But what I would say is that this pendulum that we have in life, in politics, in economics, in society, has now swung so far in favor of men being dads like yourself without having the support network and the automatic knee-jerk reaction that society has to women as mothers. Fathers don't have that privilege yet.
Part of that
And
is
I would campaign
part,
instantly.
part of that is because fathers are maybe not as well equipped to ask for help.
Well, no, the problem with men is we don't fucking talk. Honestly,
Yep.
look,
Yes.
I've just pulled it up earlier. I don't talk, and I teach this stuff.
Yeah.
I live and breathe it. I have it tattooed through the middle of my being that, we should be emotionally connected. We should be present. We should be self-aware. We should be meditating, journaling, all these things that I do. And
Mm.
still, I have a very, very narrow, tight group of people that I open up to. And I don't do it often enough. And I'm meant to be like the tip of the spear, showing everyone how to do it.
Mm.
So if I'm conscious of it and I'm quite heart connected, I've been blamed of wearing my heart on my sleeve. Still, I don't talk about it. So the average guy, and particularly if he's not a father, I mean, please God, if he's a father, he's starting to become more aware, more self-critical, as well as being more present about his need to grow into this very special space. So, no, listen, you've picked on a very good point there. Guys are nowhere near as well equipped as women. Women will literally walk into a shopping center and for whatever reason end up bumping into someone looking at the same dress or shoes or blouse or bag, whatever it might be. And before you know it, they've just told each other their worst day's moment and just felt it's okay to share. Whereas I'd need to get a bottle of vodka down me before I'd tell a stranger about my worst day.
I've gotten much better at that. And the good thing is a lot of that is through practice. With my son.
Yeah.
Now, when I see him struggling with a relationship, I can bring up a situation from my own experience, talk him through it, put words on it, talk about coping mechanisms and all that stuff. And as a result of doing that and being open to him, I've learned to become a much more open person. My
I,
I had a friend of mine read my book early on and was like, "Oh my gosh, you're really put it all out there." And it was like, "Yeah, because it can help people." I'm not
exactly.
afraid. I'm not afraid. And I don't think anybody should. I think we should talk more about this stuff. You know, um,
I feel the same. I mean, that's why I'm doing this.
yeah,
The podcasts are about, and it's already quite exciting because we've had such a range of brilliant guests. It's not sticking to a very specific format, but it is definitely sticking to a continuous feel and vibe of connected men that understand there's quite a journey to get from barely upright, which I think is where we are early doors, certainly emotionally and communication wise, to being a communicative, emotionally connected, aware father,
Mhm.
man that's able then, and again, look, the more we talk about it, the more we can get other dads to talk about it,
Yep.
the better we will become. I listen, where Jack's only 23, where Jack has yet to go with all that you've guided him through and to, all of those tools and mechanisms that you've instilled into him because you've had to learn them for yourself and for him. Wow.
Yeah. He's an amazing young man. Amazing young man. He's more social than a lot of autistic people are. He is able to handle emotions beyond his language. He's outgoing, he's caring. I really am fascinated by him. It's been a fascinating adventure, this whole fatherhood. And that's why I think we should just lean into it and go for it. And there's people around us that can help. Um, and that stat that you said about the, you know, 12 men a day committing suicide or something in England, that's troubling.
It's worse in the States,
I know that's
John. It's
troubling.
worse over there because you've got so many more service people.
Yeah,
The numbers get skewed massively because of service people and what they've been through.
yeah,
So
it's
you've
terrible. I mean, life is as bad as it was in those early days. You know, I'm glad that I fought through it and I found the other side, because our house today is, so peaceful. And it's been a long time since he's had one of those really gut wrenching temper tantrums. He has his bad days, and as do I, but there's few far between and not nearly as bad as they were in the early days.
Well, you don't need to be neurodiverse to have a bad day and to have a temper tantrum. So
That's true.
that's not fair to lay that one on Jack at all. And
That's true.
listen, I've seen some beautiful photos of the two of you together. So I
Oh, great.
know just from the images
Yep.
that he's a pretty remarkable human being.
He's a good man.
The in-person element, I hope we find an excuse at some point in the future where he might feel like being a podcast guest. That could be kind of cool.
Maybe it'll be a
Well,
short
let's see.
podcast.
Listen, or running his own podcast, even better. Let him be a host.
Right.
I think that would be kind of cool.
Maybe.
You've referenced it a couple of times, and I'm very curious. So you have people that you lean into. Is that a set group? Is that a deliberate process where you've found people with certain skills or with a certain style of communicating that helps you? Or is it just that you are as lucky as a lucky bastard can be?
I think we make our own luck when it comes to this. You got to
True.
pick the right person to talk to. Like talking to that policeman about personal insecurity. He was the right man to talk to. I do have good friends around me, but it's because I search out good friends.
Okay.
Jack does a really good job of filtering out bad people.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
no, that is just, it's a thing of beauty. I've seen it happen and I love it. I think I won't go I always have to skirt round the woo woo spirituality, religious element because it ends up getting a bit mixed up. But I'm very tuned into that side of life, and I almost see it as God's presence or the Creator's presence of what these kids can do, how they find a hidden jewel in certain people and just flick it straight on its head and just go, yeah, this is the one. This is the person you should be talking to.
yeah,
How did you even know?
yeah.
How did you get there? But they
It,
do.
yeah, he's a wonderful man. I wish he would come down and talk to you, but I don't think he's got it today.
Listen, that's not for today, but I think it could. Look, I'm
Sure,
putting it out there.
sure,
That's my moment of finding a jewel and sticking it out there. Let's see what we can do playing around with that one.
sure.
The other one I wanted to talk about, because we have one the different way markers, different pathway points that you and I have been through, and um, a I was going to call it a failed marriage, but you've been so clever and careful with your language that maybe I shouldn't call it a failed marriage as much as a marriage that survived the time and flourished in the time that it had, and then stopped flourishing as a marriage
I
because
can't
we're
say it's a failed marriage because she would agree that I'm probably a much better ex-husband than I ever was a husband.
I'd probably have the same badge.
You know,
I'd probably
that
have the same badge.
it's a process. For me, I had to stop calling her my ex. And I think we talked about this already. I really had to you know, call her Jack's mother. It's so easy to love Jack's mother and so hard to love my ex. And I have to love her, because she's gonna, she's Jack's gonna have issues with her over the years, and I need to help him with that. And you can't give something away that you don't have. So if I don't love her, how am I gonna help her to love him to love her? She's every parent, whether you're together or apart, you're still going to have parenting differences. You're still going to have power and authority issues. You're still going to have all the issues that we have as divorced, I guess, parents. They're just, with the love there, you can get through it. We just got back from a vacation. Jack graduated high school, so we took him or I took him to Memphis and Nashville, and I flew down his mother for 2 days, and she spent a couple days with us. We've become good friends. You
Yep.
know, I don't love her as my wife anymore, but I don't have to. I do love Jack's mother, and I can make sacrifices for Jack's mother. I can defend her. I can take her side, support her, all the stuff that you need to do to be a successful co-parent.
And isn't it interesting because I had this conversation only tonight because I was talking with my son about friendships and about how I'd given him some examples of how a good friend will always support another friend.
Uh-huh.
I do it with his mother so that he has examples that he can reference. There are times when, and early on, there were times when I really chewed my tongue in half, not to say the things that were running around in my head. And as I reset that program and understood that there was no need for it, this was my own dialogue for me, wasn't serving him, wasn't serving the parenting dynamic, but I still had to get over my pain of the separation. The thing that I always came back to was, as far as I was concerned, we'd separated to be better parents individually because we weren't in a place where the relationship was doing as well as we wanted it to do and as well as it had done in the past. So it was always my overarching thinking that I had to show him what a healthy adult male and female relationship looked like, what a healthy mum and dad looked like, whilst not living under the same roof.
Yeah.
And it took a long time.
Sure.
I still would have to say my dialogue, my vocabulary is not as healthy or as balanced as yours. But the intention's there, and I've noticed that we have a lot more synchronicity over the difficult bits. So whereas before I'd get triggered or become acidic, that ain't happening. And similarly, on her behalf, I think there are times, I mean, she shocked me only this week with her artful dealing of an issue that I didn't know was an issue, and I had to go and sort it out. It was going on elsewhere in our dynamic. But, in the past, I would have definitely been dragged over the coals for that one and had an extra level of pain. So it's a tracking thing and it's an evolutionary thing. The intention's there for both of us at all times. We want him to have two healthy parents.
Yeah.
And I've always said to him that, it's very important that his mother's in his life. We have a 50-50 deal, and it's a true 50-50. There are times when he gets uppity and says, but I want to be with you. No, it's your designated time with your mum. It's an agreed time that we have. Giving it up is a sacrifice. So I'm sacrificing so that your mum can benefit, but your mum sacrifices so that I can benefit from being with you. It's interesting because that's been an intention since the beginning, but I would have to say that the other intentions that you talk about, that dynamic between the two of us, it's evolving into something a lot better. But
Mm.
again, neurodiverse or not neurodiverse, I think we have to be good examples of what we would hope to be good interaction, good human behavior between two people. So not just as an example, but as an intention in and of the action. Tie
Sure.
myself up here now, John. Save me for
That's
crying out
okay.
loud.
No, you're doing a great job. Yeah, it's we've had differences over the years, and we've had to work through a lot of things. And one of the things I had to work through is, I had custody, full custody for a while, and so I when she came like back as an equal parent, it was really easy for me to throw additional requirements on her, and
Okay.
throw different. And I had to catch myself and stop doing that. The only requirement is that she wants to be part of Jack's life, and when I did that, it took my needs right out of the way because the family has to come first,
Yep.
and that's hard. That's hard to you got to sacrifice yourself, and but we do it, and then we have different parenting styles, of course, and he thrives under both. But when he's doing something at her house, it's her rules,
Yep.
and whether I agree with it or not, you know, her house, her rules, and I'm on her side. And so he doesn't get to play us against each other.
No,
So,
well, listen, we've already had that, and we've already nipped it in the bud. And then also, it's interesting because there are times when he has meltdowns, small, and to process those, there are times, and I notice it that he will catch her, and she might be tired, or it just might be just bad timing. To
mhm.
be fair to his mother, she'll call me and she'll go, "Listen, we're having this issue. What's your view? Can you help?" And again, I know what the script is. I know what the outcome is that we're driving towards from two different houses, like you say. But the outcome we want is the same, and we're able to process it. But again, I've got to say that that giving up full custody and then catching yourself, because there's going to be so many moments in your memory, so many micro chapters of, well, you weren't there when this happened, or I've done all of this with him without you, so fuck you. Again, is very, very,
It's not
very
good for
commendable.
anybody. It's
Listen,
not good
I'm
for
not
anybody.
saying you're a saint about it. I'm not kidding
No,
myself,
no.
but I, John, I would have been a long way down the road before I would have been giving up full custody.
Yeah,
The
well,
only caveat I will say is I recognize he needs a mother, his mother. He needs a woman, but he needs his mother in his life. And that is the only thing that probably will always stop me from becoming selfish over the subject of he's mine, he's all mine, I'll take care of him on my own kind of mentality.
I think you have to ask yourself before you make a decision, is this best for me or is this best for Jack? And I think
Yeah,
that's what you're getting at.
yeah,
And what's best for Jack is that he has two parents. And the one thing I can say about her is, with all our differences, is that she loves him as much as me. The only person that loves him as much as me. And so when I recognize that, it's hard to not let him in, let her in his life. I mean, it's necessary.
I know, but let's have it right. It's like walking past the cake shop. It's not going to be easy if you have to walk past 10 of them. There are times when you really do have to remind yourself, well, I'm going to the gym, I'm eating healthy, I can't have 10 cakes a day.
Nothing worthwhile is easy.
Exactly. Exactly that. It's so true. So tell me about the times with the journalism, because you came out, you said you were in insurance. Was that in life and pensions or was that general insurance?
It was actually auto and health, and a
Okay.
little bit of disability. But I was
Okay.
I was kind of moving up in insurance, and at the time that Jack was born and started showing his problems, it just wasn't. Our marriage was breaking down. It just wasn't worthwhile. And then when I found myself as a single dad with him, I had to pick a job that was more flexible than made money. So I took a huge pay cut, and I never looked back. I mean, there's been days where I wish I had more money. Spending time with Jack, like I could say I'm the one parent that doesn't say I wish I spent more time with my son. I
Yeah.
spent so much time with him, and we had so many good adventures, and he seems to he's a calendar savant, so he can tell you like what day of the week you were born on if you give him the date. He can like he picks up things like that. He uses that to introduce himself to people, and it's just so fun to watch And we were sitting there in it was high school sports a lot of times I was covering, and he would make these connections with these high school kids, big tough
Love it.
football players and stuff, and he would like bring them right down to his level, and he was
Fantastic.
really extraordinary at that.
So
And
he's an artful communicator, and he knows what his USP is, and he digs into that every time.
yeah, yeah, he knows
Nice.
he can communicate up to a point, and then but he always gets his thoughts across.
It's interesting you talk about that time, that experience, and that time that you've had together with all those experiences, because there's two things I know from tracking some great people that have done great things, and they're out there, their books and everything else, their stories are out there. But the one overarching factor, no matter how successful they are in life, the really well put together people, however they've arrived at that, whether they were born that way or built themselves into that, they all talk about the experience factor being the most valuable element of their lives. Not how
Mhm.
many Ferraris they got, not how many houses. And I've known some billionaires and been around them and been very close to them. And the richness of their lives is not the stuff they've bought. The richness of their lives is either the freedom to choose experiences or the freedom to have experiences.
Yeah.
And to be honest, as an older dad, my regret more than anything else now is that Balthazar has not met my father because he passed 25 and a bit years ago. He's not been through that experience I had of spending an awful lot of time in Ireland, where both my parents came from and when my grandparents were. When I was a kid, I was able to see them. And that life, that beauty and that contrast that comes from that culture and that island, I can't convey that to him. I've had that experience, but I can't give him that experience. So I part of me is really sad, and then part of me understands, hang on a minute, I'm gonna give him other experiences. We have got we've got a different track. I've just realized now talking to you about it. So I lived in Portugal for 15, 16 years, and I have a very beautiful and deep network of friends there. And he's very familiar with that. That's as much of my identity as a dad in England as for him as it is to be his dad in Portugal. And he loves it.
Mm.
He thrives on the fact, well, when are we going to go and see so and so, or how's Diogo? Different different points of reference that he has. But I'm with you. I feel very blessed that I've spent a lot of time with him, but I'm also aware that it's a finite thing. I think maybe you and Jack, it's slightly different because the special needs process goes into adulthood. But I would imagine in the late teens that my son's going to want to go off and do a lot of his own stuff. Whereas Jack still has a healthy requirement for you to be nearby and to be a factor in his day to day living. Would that be fair?
Uh, yeah, I would say it's fair, but I mean, he still does like his independence. Right
Okay.
now we're trying to find him a job and stuff, and that's a whole process in the United States. But once we do get him a job, he makes friends. He goes bowling every week with these group of special needs residents in town, and he loves it. He makes friends there and stuff, and he doesn't always want me around. I sometimes sit with one of the dads, and he's over there with his friends, and I'm over there. So he's every bit the same as every other kid. It's just that there are times when he wants me around, of course, but there's times when your son's going to want you around always.
Eh, yeah, I suspect Jack will be better at communicating that than most kids as well. Most young men. I mean, he's a young man now, so
Yeah,
let's be fair. I would imagine he's a lot more skillful at that than most 23-year-olds because they just they're men. Again, we're going back to that thing. A, they're men, and B, they're 23. Their emotions and that communication around their emotions is still fuzzy.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, he's
So
pretty good at emotional communication. He's able to put a lot of his emotions into words, and we're able to talk through them a lot.
So one of the things that was on my list that I wanted to touch on with you is the educational aspect of raising a special needs child? Because you talk about it, it's part of your book, unless I've got this
Yeah,
wrong.
no, you're right. There's a chapter on, I call it surviving the ists, because it was, in America they have, it's called an IPE, an independent, whatever it's called, but you have to sit down every year and come up with this curriculum independently when you special needs. So you
Okay.
walk into a room and it's like there's teachers and behavioralists and linguists and somebody from the Board of Education and somebody from the school. And so, and like, there's a room full of people and they've all got these reports. And, and then they're all telling you, like, these are the deficiencies and this is what you got to do. I remember the first time we went into one, it was in the middle of our divorce. And, it felt like they were all pointing fingers at us.
Yeah.
I know, because she was sitting next to me and it was like, it was so uncomfortable. But I started realizing that everybody's got a role. And that's what the whole chapter is, about how you build a team. I had to start recognizing that, the behavioralist has some expertise and the linguist has some expertise. And I'd ask him questions because I was an expert on my son.
Yeah.
So, and we started working together and we really had a great experience. We tried some things. There were times when the Board of Education said no, and we found ways to incorporate things into his educational plan and, that didn't cost any money. And it was a real, like, it takes a village. And I think that school was really my village. I was very lucky, very fortunate there that we had a whole school and a community that really cared. And they worked so hard at it. And I always felt like we were partners.
So this wasn't home educated. This was
No,
this was within the school structure.
yes, in a school structure, in a special education school.
Okay. We have I'm going to say a lot. A lot is probably not a fair statement, and you can beat me up in the comments for my naivety over it. Now, well, listen, when this goes live, I'm sure we'll have some British-based parents saying, "No, there's a massive gap," and I don't
There
doubt
might
it. But
be. There might
I
be.
know of 2 or 3 schools in this area in Hampshire, and one in particular that's quite phenomenal. It's a very newly built, really, really aware, but the numbers are small. I do appreciate that, within this school, the numbers are tiny of places that they can accommodate. Um, but I also know in my little boys' school that they have a lot of awareness around this and that there's, as much as possible, they try and integrate it into the school curriculum.
Yep.
I'm not sure that we have this great range of specialists that come together. I think there's
Yep.
there's people that are educated in general around it, but I think the specialists there, like you say, those specialists sitting there helping you,
Yeah,
it's
it was
really.
a good experience. And in the United States, that is with the No Child Left Behind law that was, I don't know, probably 20 years ago, really incorporated children into the school system. But there's pitfalls in that too. I've heard some horror stories from people, because personalities go, overcome the principles, and next
Yeah,
thing you know, there's fights and there's power
territory.
dynamics and all the same stuff like in the family. And I had to treat it the same way, and then I supported them when they were doing something that I didn't agree with. You know, I still would find a way to support them at home. Uh,
Okay.
and I'd tell them, listen, I don't agree with this, or I don't think it's going to work. And sometimes I was right, and sometimes I was wrong. But I did try to work with them and try to, because success is the goal. You
Yes.
know,
Yeah, no,
and
that's the outcome, isn't it? Whether
yeah,
whether it was whether it was your formula or their formula,
yeah,
again, we come back to the love, the presence, the intention, and if those 3 things are that this is the outcome I want, I don't care if I've got to walk over broken glass. I'll take that walk every morning
yeah. But it was
for the
it was
outcome.
good to have an actual school system. He had to qualify for it and stuff, and all the kids in the school were special needs. But they do incorporate it into regular schools here too. Some higher functioning children they're incorporating in regular schools. But when I was a child here in the United States, there were still a lot of states that if you were special needs, that you were excluded from education.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's a relatively new, I mean, relatively new. Jack was born at the right time, in the right place, it sounds like.
Yeah, no, it is definitely relatively new, not least of which because we're only just now getting around to a language that works. And I can remember in certain countries I've lived in where neurodiversity was a real social handicap,
Yeah.
and they were ostracized within the local, and I'm talking about small villages
Yeah.
where, oh, so and so, that's so and so's kid. Yeah, we don't really talk about him, or we don't pay that much attention.
Yep.
They've got enough problems. We don't bother them. They don't bother us. I mean, I'm old enough now that I can go back 30, 40 years and reflect on that. It's definitely not the case now, thank heavens.
I mean, that's not long ago. Autism itself is a new condition. I mean,
Yeah,
it's probably been around forever, but I mean,
undiagnosed.
the first person that was diagnosed just passed away. So
Yes.
it hasn't been around that long.
Well, first to recognize and name it, and then to actually have a process that says, it's okay. It's okay. We know what it is. We know
Yeah.
how to manage it, and we know how to get the best outcome for the family and for the child.
Yeah.
Which leads me on, because you've triggered a question for me. So where is Jack's leaning around work? Has he got any focus? Because I mean, listen, I still don't know what I'm meant to do as a job. I've done plenty of them, but if you said to me, what do I want to do? Actually, I probably want to be a podcast host. The money ain't great at the moment, but that's not to say, and again, that's something completely new at 63. I'm just thinking, I like this.
Yeah, believe it or not, he said he wanted to work in a nursery, a florist.
Okay.
But it looks like most of the jobs that he's able to work in are a lot of cleaning jobs and stuff like that. There's Easter seals. We're working with them right now to try to find a job that works on his skills and strengths. Hopefully we'll get him something soon.
Well, I'm only throwing my tuppence 2 cents in there just to say I changed currency there. Did you see that? So throwing
Yes.
my 2 cents in, that if he knows or feels where he wants to go, you'll get there. I think,
Yeah.
if he says, this is where I see myself, this is what I want to be doing, the way you've operated for the last 23 years around that young man, you'll find a way of dropping him in the box that he wants to land in.
Yeah,
Of
he has
that,
a
I
way of
have.
getting he has a way of getting where he wants to go. So I'm sure it's going to work out for him. It just
Well,
takes a little longer sometimes.
I also think he's got a good facilitator for helping him do that.
Thank you.
Truth be told,
Thank you.
my pleasure. My pleasure. It's the truth. It's what I've spotted. I can't change that. John, I would love it if you've got 2, 3, 5 things that you would like to share, and we can close out the show on, for parents of special needs children, stuff that may be in your book, stuff that you haven't put into the book but is at the forefront of your mind as we've gone through this show.
From my perspective, parenting is not about lecturing a child. It's not about disciplining a child. It's about meeting them where they are and giving them some options, and mentoring them through a process, which is scary. I mean, we all know what it's like to grow up. And the one thing that I've learned with Jack is that, he really only cares, like the stuff that I used to care about are not important to him,
Yeah.
and I've learned to reevaluate life, reevaluate expectations, reevaluate my relationship towards things like security and ambitions and social issues. I dreamed big dreams when I was a kid, but
I still do.
I still do, but I never really understood how nice it is to have a small circle of really good people. And Jack showed me that. I learned more from him than he's learned from me, I think, over the years. And I know that sounds cliche, but I really do. He really made me rethink what was important in my life and rethink my emotional status, my coping mechanisms, my everything. And we really did grow up together. Matter of fact, Growing Up Together was the original working title of the book.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. The problem is it doesn't convey
No.
that critical dynamic of Jack being Jack,
Right.
which I understand. But I we're going back to the woo woo for a minute, but
Okay.
there's a fairly strong currency out there that says our children choose us. Now, the maths behind it say that there must be some sort of argument to it, because the numbers are boggling. It's in the billions against you or I even existing. because you can go back 7 generations of parents having to have a child that survived. As an example, in my dad's household, he was born in nine. He was one of, I believe, 14 children born in that house,
Sure.
of which only, I think it was either 10 or 11 survived through infant death or very early childhood deaths. Um, he often went around with no shoes on because that's just how hard times were in that part of Ireland. And somehow he got himself out of that environment, got himself into England. After a period of time, met my mother, and they had me.
Mhm.
Now that those numbers say to me that maybe there is something about the whole process of our kids choosing us to be their parents, because the numbers will kind of support it. But I feel the same way. And I talk to a lot of dads that are healthy, present dads, and we all say the same thing. The shit our kids have taught us is the most valuable lessons. They're the most heartwarming. They're the most crucifying. There are days when what my son teaches me breaks me until I understand where I'm meant to sit in that, and how much he's helped me to evolve, how much he's helped me to be a better ex-husband, but current father of a child,
Mhm.
using your words in reverse.
I saw that.
It's beautiful. I mean, I thrive off of it, and I'm probably, I warn you now, I'm probably going to steal the shit out of growing up together because I love it. It's a really good headline for being a great dad.
Yeah. Yep.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anything more you would like to touch on? Have I missed anything? Is there anything that you feel in your heart you want to throw out there? Because this is for you as much as it is for anyone.
No, I mean, if you know of somebody that has a special needs child and is struggling, and they don't know where to go, I would like to point out that this book is designed for them, and hopefully it'll bring them. They won't go through as many pitfalls as me to get to where I am now.
Well, that
It's a
isn't
Go ahead.
is it sorry, isn't that the purpose of any book, any guide, any bit of written material, even this podcast? Please God, we can just smooth out a bump in someone's journey just to give them that little bit of help when they nearly fell over, we'll stop them.
Yep. And it works. It works. I've you know, helped a lot of parents of special needs children here. I'm kind of driven to
Brilliant.
do that because when they're overwhelmed, I just want to kind of give them a hug and tell them,
Yep.
listen, it's going to be so great. You're not going to regret this at all. Just you're in it, and you're not alone, and it's going to be the best adventure of your life.
Well, that book has already started your legacy. Let me just say that you and Jack have created through that book, through your growing together, growing up together, you've already started a legacy that gives me joy. So
Thank you.
I can't wait to promote the living daylights out of this podcast and that book.
Thank you.
And I have no doubt that someone out there is going to pick it up and you will have helped them. So thank you.
Thank you, Thomas.
It's been a real pleasure, Jack. John, sorry.
Like,
It's been a real pleasure. I've got Jack on the brain now. I'm going to be
that's
thinking
okay.
about him all night long.
That's the best compliment you gave me.
Well, it came from the heart. So thank you so much. I'm going to leave it there.
Okay.
Hope everyone watching or listening has enjoyed this as much as I have. And within the notes, you will find the details of how to reach out to John, how to get a copy of his book. And I suspect that if you have any moments of lack of faith, any moments where you are overwhelmed, he is without a doubt the man that you should be checking into.
Thank you.
Have a great one. It's
You
been
too.
lovely. Thank you, John.
You too.